Hello and
No.
Oh. Can we kill the 2 minutes 45 seconds?
Yeah, I don't know why we have it so long. Okay, so we're but what about if people saw it and they're going
They
to the
went
bathroom?
away.
Yeah.
Well,
So we
they'll
will.
learn life comes at you fast, and yeah.
Okay, so
Okay, so hello and welcome
well, let me kill it.
to all of our viewers, wherever you may be. My name is MK Smith,
And I'm Bassam Haddad.
and we are both delighted to be your co-hosts for Season 3, Episode 3 of Live with ASI, a month of knowledge production, recapping the month of October.
Okay, we have an introduction right now.
We have a great show planned today with more coverage of the ongoing protests in Iran, a piece on Afghanistan and the left, a forthcoming Arab Studies Journal issue, new episodes from the Connections podcast, consumer the history of protest in Jordan, pedagogy, new texts out now, and must-read recommendations.
And of course, timely interviews with Catherine Sameh, Naveed Mansouri, Anila Dolatsai, and Sadia Tour, Moin Rabbani, and Jillian Schwedler.
As always, you can find all of the content discussed today in the accompanying episode digest to be published on jadalia.com in the coming days.
So sit back, relax, and let's get to it.
It has been over a month since anti-government protests broke out in Iran after the death of Kurdish Iranian woman Mahsa Jin Amini while in police custody. In that time, Jadalia's Iran page has been working diligently, putting out a number of pieces addressing various aspects of the protest movements and the politics surrounding it.
We want to recommend the Iran page for their dedicated...
We want to commend them.
We want to recommend.
Or recommend them.
I want to recommend
for anything.
Okay, I'd like to recommend them. We would like to commend the Iran page on Jadalia for their dedicated work during this time, as the work they're putting out provides much needed depth for the current moment. We spoke last show with the Iran page's Manije Moradian and Catherine Sameh about the outbreak of the protests, and in just a moment we'll have Catherine Sameh back on as well, and her fellow Iran page co-editor Naveed Mansouri to discuss the progression of the protests and the page's recent publications on the matter.
All right, let's bring them in.
Let's bring them in. Here we go.
Hi, Catherine. Hi, Naveed.
Hi, everybody.
Hello, we're glad you're recommending us.
Yeah, I recommend and commend. Absolutely.
Wonderful. Well, we'll get right into it and ask the burning questions that everyone has, which is first and foremost, can you tell us a little bit, especially since last month, Catherine, when you were on the show, how the protest movement has progressed over the course of the past month?
Sure. So I'm gonna start answering that question by focusing on the the bad news, which is that, of course, state repression has not only continued but intensified. I think as of today, I think at the very least, based on a conservative estimate, a few hundred people have died. It may be more, but that's a very conservative estimate. In addition to that, I think around 2,000 people, I think, are going to be put on trial, and these will be public trials. The judiciary has come out and both earlier in October said that they wanted expedited trials and they wanted the trials to be severe. And so some of the crimes that are being, or the punishments that are being given are going to be for crimes that are in the context of the Islamic Republic punishable by death, like crimes against God, for example, and things like that. In the meanwhile, too, there have been, of course, ongoing protests and clashes with the police that happened, for example, on Mahsa Amini's 40th. Of course, the 40th day after someone's death is a day set aside for mourning, and historically in Iran, especially around the revolution, the days allotted ritualistically for mourning become also days of protest. And so here again, we see that on the 40th, there was a day both of mourning and of protest, and there were clashes with the police. Um, and so, and in addition to that, I should say that in the course of last month, there were also two big, I think, in one conflagrations. In one case, literally, there was the fires that broke out at Evin prison. The state TV has said that there were prisoners who were trying to escape, which resulted in fighting, which resulted in the fire. Of course, that's state TV. It's not clear what happened, but that the fire in Evin is such a symbol of state repression that the fire there kind of, I would say, was evocative in terms, evoked the imagination to imagine that as a site of struggle with historical significance. And another big thing that happened that was tangentially related to the protests was that there was an attack on Shah Chirag Mosque in Shiraz that killed 15 people. Immediately after, by way of telegraph, ISIS claimed responsibility for the attacks. But also immediately afterwards, that ASI came out and said that the riots paved the way for this kind of moment of vulnerability. And so you kind of see state repression, and then from the site of the Islamic Republic, kind of like, or at least the state, this kind of like unrelenting sort of effort to delegitimize the riots and to portray them as ultimately threats to national security. So, Catherine, would you like to take it from here?
Sure, sure. Sorry, I think I dropped off. So yeah, there's a lot of bad news as Naveed has laid out. I think the good news is the protests are ongoing. People are determined. We have, since the start of the protest, you've had, of course, incredible support from teachers, protests from students. Some of the oil workers in the oil sector have been protesting. So the support inside Iran for the movement continues to grow. It cannot be permanently squelched at this point. And then, of course, there's tremendous international solidarity that is, spotlighting on this movement, that is in support of this movement. And we have to keep, of course, building that solidarity from below. So even with this incredible repression that Naveed has laid out, people are determined, and no matter what happens, something has shifted profoundly.
Wonderful. Thank you. That was a very comprehensive review of the last month. And certainly we will continue to learn as protests continue on. Now, following up a little bit more in detail, could the two of you give us a little bit of insight as to what separates the pieces published by the Iran page? What kind of content are they covering with regard to the protests? Are we looking at particular topics, just broad view, that sort of thing?
Sure. Yeah, I'll begin. I think so. We'll just go through some of the pieces that we've published since then. One of the ones that we published that was a really powerful, anonymously written testimony written by someone by the name of El, and that was translated by Alireza Dustad, where Elle basically attests to what she described as a gap between her experiencing seeing the images of protests and her experience of actually being on the streets. And through that sort of engaging that, what she calls gap, she sort of provides this idea of the act of resistance as actually where the beauty, or the idea of beauty actually belongs within within this uprising, in contrast to maybe a more conventional or Orientalist way of thinking about this around the veil, where the veil is basically concealing an underlying beauty, and that the act of unveiling is showing the sort of the face, right? And so moving us away from that and actually thinking of the act of resistance itself in all of its multiple and myriad ways as together giving us this sort of beautiful image of resistance. And it's really beautiful. And if you have a chance, it's called Figuring a Woman's Revolution. And if you haven't read it yet, I can't recommend it enough. And the second thing was a poem called Baroye by Fatine Farahani. Baroye was, of course, the song that was written by Shervin Hajipur. That kind of became like the anthem of the revolution. Hajipur, unfortunately, has been arrested. But in Baroya means for, or like for the sake of, and in this song he speaks of all the things that these uprisings are for the sake of, and it's been translated. The original lyrics of the song have been translated. So if you don't know Persian, you can find the translations and listen to the song. And what Fajna has done is she's gone through and written these like what she calls 70 feminist reasons, kind of doing a variation on that theme, talking about all of the reasons that these uprisings are for the sake of, in light of the longer history of patriarchy in Iran and in the current moment. And yeah, so those are, these two kinds of, in a way, testimonies about the sort of condition that Iranians and especially women are in today.
Yeah, and then two more pieces quickly. One, Wajina, written by two Kurdish scholars, Farangis Gaderi and Özlem Goner. There's been, of course, a lot of attention to the fact that Gina Masami was Kurdish. And in this article, the scholars really look at not just how it's important to draw that connection between the fact that she was Kurdish and that the protests and uprising started there, but that there's a long history of Kurdish women's liberation, and really kind of organized around not just a kind of single issue politics, but a politics of life, and a kind of deep and long history of challenging a kind of masculinist organization of life and politics. So that's a really wonderful article. And then I just want to say, speaking of transnational solidarity, we compiled not a comprehensive list, but a list of solidarity statements from both academic institutions, but also from kind of transnational feminist groups around the world. And it's a really incredible set of statements. I'll, point out a couple. The one from the Afghan women's movement is fantastic, drawing a lot of connections. And then also from Indian feminist collective that is really, again, saying we are in solidarity because we too are facing both authoritarianism and the kinds of have been battling also with a kind of anti-imperialist, anti-war politics, and we're bringing these two together just as our comrades in Iran are. So I point people, if you need some inspiration during this difficult time, to the solidarity statements on our page.
Thank you, folks, very much. I know that this will not end anytime very soon, and we do look forward to continuing to watch how you will be sharing what is going on the ground and hopefully simplifying it. A lot of people have been glued, to the news. But as with the case of the Arab uprisings or the previous protests in Iran, there is like a window after which people sort of check out. And I hope that we could continue our coverage and keep things coming. And I know that of a few things happening actually at the broader Iran project at the Arab Studies Institute. And I also should mention at this point that I am myself interviewing Peyman Jafari next Tuesday at 2 p.m. It will also be broadcast here as well as on a new podcast that we will share in due time.
Wonderful. Thank you both for joining us. Thank you for your critical and nuanced insight, and we look forward to having you both back.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye, friends.
Take care.
Take care.
Take care. Thank you.
Thank you.
I like the music in that interlude.
Yeah.
It's kind of groovy. I like it. Okay, moving on. Grievance as Movement, a conversation on knowledge production on Afghanistan and the left. Earlier this month, to mark 21 years since the U.S. invasion of Afghanistan, Anila Joletsai, Sadia Tur, and Sahar Gumkor wrote a piece for Jadaliya titled Grievance as Movement, a conversation on knowledge production on Afghanistan and the left. Today, we have several of these authors joining us to discuss the various shortcomings demonstrated by the left in their engagement with Afghanistan and its history.
The piece is an important read for anyone who felt concerned by the discourse surrounding the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan, be it from those who were disappointed by the lack of results of the U.S. efforts, or from those touting the withdrawal as an anti-imperialist victory.
In a moment, we will be joined by two of the piece's authors, Anila and Sadia, to tell us more. Let's bring them on. Hello to both.
And yes, if we can get a video, I think there might be one video or none.
No, I think we're both not on video.
Both not on
That
video.
is totally
That's totally fine.
understandable.
I hope that's okay.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. We are happy to have you here in any capacity.
Super.
Wonderful.
We're very happy to be here, and thanks for giving us the space to elaborate on our piece a bit.
Of course. Well, thank you for being here. Thank you for submitting your piece. It was incredible. We'll get right to it and ask, in what ways, to synthesize your piece, in what ways has Afghanistan been disregarded or de-emphasized in progressive and leftist discourse?
Well, I'll start, Savi. I hope you don't mind. Just by saying, we each were approached by different media outlets, with the 1 year withdrawal to speak, and particularly we were asked about to write on women's issues from left spaces, right? And we're 21 years into the invasion and occupation of Afghanistan, yet we're still remarkably in the same place and being asked to do that same kind of work, right? Speak on the women's question. So we wanted to sit and think, and these were from left spaces. We're not speaking of the other media outlets, focusing on the left, and we were so we came together to say, like, how do we mark this and sort of lodge this grievance? But and it wasn't. It's supposed to be like a takedown piece of everyone, right? Or people on the left, trying to do their best. It was supposed to be, how can we, have conversations like this one that you are all staging, which we really appreciate, right? To think and move with, right? So lodge our grievances as scholars and people from these regions, to then say, how can we have different kinds of conversations, particularly on the left, right? Because it's really easy to critique the liberal position, the right position, but with the case of Afghanistan, it's remarkable. There's, as I stated in the piece, it's very difficult to distinguish the left position from the liberal position if we're still being asked to comment on the women's question, right? And again, it was about the 1 year withdrawal from the U.S. From Afghanistan, right? Ground withdrawal. It didn't have to, So that's why also we contacted Jadaliya to say we wanted to mark the invasion and occupation of Afghanistan and signal that date, right? Because it's 21 years and we should be somewhere different in speaking about and thinking about and theorizing about and doing activist work with, but we're not.
Thank you very much. Go ahead, please.
Exactly, what we were trying to do, and weird exceptionalism around Afghanistan that, Anila was trying to mark with this fact that the women's question seems to be the only way in which the left wants to engage with Afghanistan even now. And I think, Anila will speak to this as well, because this has been her experience too. But my experience of working in the anti-war left, specifically in New York City, this I'm speaking about like the period just following Obama's election, when the anti-war movement just sort of up and died, right? Because Afghanistan, apparently, even for the left, was the good war, and Iraq was the bad war. And a bunch of us in New York were trying to push back against this and trying to push the anti-war left to kind of recognize that this is what they were doing by going silent after Obama's election. And what I realized, because I seem to have plunged myself at that moment into an intra-left problem was this exceptionalism around Afghanistan, but the inability to kind of see Afghanistan as a place that is complex, that has a history, and a history that doesn't just go back to the last proxy war between the US and Soviet Union, but even before that, and a failure to kind of build a rich and deep engagement with Afghanistan. I mean, some people did try to do that with all the complexities and constraints that we had. People did invite Malala Joya, did try to kind of push her voice out into the mainstream. But apart from that, I think for us, the looking at like who was speaking on Afghanistan and the withdrawal at this moment kind of really highlighted the absence of any effort really to build a stronger left movement around the occupation of Afghanistan. The fact that you had the same people who were not Afghan, who had no real history of working on the Afghan occupation or in Afghanistan, being asked to be on panels and to speak, I think was a reflection of this broader problem of the inability to take Afghanistan seriously outside of, as Anila was pointing out, the same liberal frameworks. I just want to push this further to say that the women's question really came to the fore because Afghanistan, even within the left, seems to be looked on just completely through the lens of the Taliban and what leaving, this discourse of like, oh, the US shouldn't have been there. But now, if we're talking about what an anti-imperialist position should be, well, that's complicated by the fact that, the US is the only force able to somehow, keep the Taliban at bay. And I think this has been an ongoing problem that I'm sure Neela will also speak to.
Thank you so much. Can I follow up with a brief question?
Sure.
What sorts of corrections do you suggest for anti-imperialist leftists who want to begin engaging with Afghanistan?
That's a great question, and yeah, it's a very important question. And for us, again, that's the movement part of why we were calling grievances movement, right? We really want activists across the world, right, to sit with one another, to whether collectively or individually do that work on yourself. Like how, if you ascribe to be an anti-imperialist, what and how have you expressed solidarity for Afghanistan? Is it just in accordance with the news cycle? How have you thought about one of the most stunning acts of violence over the past 21 years and ongoing, right? How have you excluded it from conversations or spaces to think critically about what's happening to that people and a place, right? And so I think it's, without being too prescriptive, I think the beginnings that we should be individually doing that work with ourselves, right? How have I not done enough? Right? And I do that with myself as well, right? And then collectively, right? How can we sit together and talk? Like, I want people to read this piece, tear it apart, right? Critique it, but sit and say, how can we do better? What are the spaces we can open up for Afghan anti-imperialists? How can we, have disagreements and still move forward, but include Afghanistan? Like, Saudi had referenced this earlier, but like, I remember like in anti-war organizing for the war in Iraq, I was told, when I was being asked to be a speaker, right before I would go up to the microphone at these, answering all these anti-war coalitions, against the war in Iraq and that organizing, is please don't mention Afghanistan. Now, the war in Afghanistan was ongoing, but I wasn't at an anti-war rally for Iraq supposed to mention and link, or somehow I was told categorically several times over and over in different spaces, please don't bring in Afghanistan. This is about Iraq. Right? And so that's just signaling something that happened 20 plus years ago, but we do see the symptoms and the effects of it ongoing, right? So I don't have a prescriptive answer, Boston, but I really appreciate the question and the sincerity of where it comes from, because I do think we all need to make more spaces like this, more time to literally do that work and how we can do better. Because to be in the same place 21 years after an invasion and an ongoing occupation, it's it's more than stunning.
Well, thank you both so much. You've given us a lot to think about and ruminate on, especially
And I just want to add.
Yep. Go ahead.
Please go
Oh,
ahead.
I'm sorry. Do we have time? Otherwise,
Yeah,
I think
please
Anila's
add
point is.
what you
Yeah,
wanted to share.
I wanted to just sort of tag on to Anila's. Right. I just want to add on to what Anila is saying. By also, Basam, going back to something you had said, which is that we need to move beyond these two extremes that the left has when it deals with the issue of the U.S. Invasion and occupation of Afghanistan, which is like either to treat the Taliban as an expression of anti-imperialism and celebrate them, and therefore celebrate the withdrawal of the U.S. as some kind of like success or victory of anti-imperialism, and the other extreme, which is to see the Taliban as the only way in which we can think about having a position, and letting that complicate things to the point where like people that I knew were unable to take a categorically anti-imperialist stance on the US ongoing presence at that time in Afghanistan, because they kept bringing up the problem that the Taliban posed. And I think Anila and I have spoken, together about this and separately, but I think the left across the world really, and I would include in Muslim majority regions as well as Muslim minority regions, the left really needs to do a deep think about how it thinks about the question of religion, religiosity. I'm not even talking about extremist movements. I'm talking about just its dis-ease with thinking about people who are religious, and it's therefore its inability to actually reach out and engage with people who are not explicitly secular and who do not start and end their interventions and their analysis through that secular, lens. And I think that has been a huge, huge problem for the left, specifically when it came to Afghanistan, because of this figure of the Taliban.
Thank you so much. And thank you both for the fantastic piece that you contributed, as well as for joining us today to discuss and to help educate us. I know I learned a lot from this conversation.
Absolutely.
As someone who hopes to consider herself an anti-imperialist, especially with regards to Afghanistan. This was incredibly informative. So thank you very, very much. We hope and look forward to continuing this conversation, whether it be via text on Jadaliya or back on the show. So thank you both for joining us.
Thank you both. Thanks a lot.
Thank you
Have a
so
great
much.
day.
Thank you very much.
You too.
We are very happy to announce that the fall 2022 issue of the Arab Studies Journal will be released December 1st. To bide us over until then, the editor's note and the table of contents are available on Jadaliya to look at right now. So if you just can't wait to see what's in this issue of ASJ, you can totally access the table of contents as well as the editor's note. And we definitely should also mention that this is a huge issue for us, not issue as in problem, issue as in copy, because it is the 30th anniversary of the Arab Studies Journal that Bassem founded back in 1994. Two. I can do math. There's no problem there. Back in 1992, and we are going to continue this conversation and talk about the celebration of and impact of ASJ, especially for young scholars. But until then, I'll let Bassem take the stage.
Well, we are now sharing the actual screenshot of the website of the announcement of the upcoming issue, Fall 22, Volume 30, Number 2. And as you can see, you could actually take a look at the editor's note. Let's move this a little bit.
And the editor's note touches on the fact that the issue presents a stellar collection of articles, essays, and reviews that provide new perspective on vital questions of capitalism, nationalism, as well as the environment. The issue also includes an essay section titled Critical Environmental Perspectives in Middle East Studies, as well as another robust books reviews section.
and you are welcome to click on the link to actually read more about the upcoming issue. And if you can also click on this nice blue link here, that would be great. This will take you to the subscription page, in which for a very modest amount, you could get a subscription to the Arab Studies Journal, as we are, as everyone knows, predominantly a volunteer organizations, not least the actual journal itself.
And come December, the December issue, we will have some folks from ASJ on to discuss in depth this issue.
Absolutely.
Great.
And we will just do a quick interlude.
It is always a pleasure to tell you all about the new episodes of Connections podcast. That's right, I said episodes plural, because Muin Rabbani has been on a roll producing not one, not two, not three, but 4 episodes of Connections in this past month. It was obviously an incredibly busy month for the Jadalia co-editor, who was hard at work publishing these great episodes of the Connections podcast. In case you're not already familiar, the Connections podcast combines journalism, analysis, and scholarship to offer timely and informative interviews on current events and broader policy questions, as well as themes relevant to knowledge production.
As always, Mu'in brings us timely and incisive discussions on urgent matters, and over the course of the last month, covered topics ranging from the Palestinian right to self-determination. What is that? And class and identity politics in Egypt, the uprising in Iran, and the attacks on Armenia.
We did not have Muin on the show last month, and we missed him dearly, but we're excited to have him with us here today. Welcome, friend. Welcome back.
MK, Bassam, good to see you guys again.
Ahlan wa sahlan. With an improved background, or is this...
It's the same background.
This is the same background.
Same background. Wow. Okay.
Yeah,
I'm really...
I need to set up the green screen. I'll be in touch.
That'd be excellent. I mean, actually, you know, the orange is basically you're like being a bit nationalist there, because you lived in Holland for ages,
for
right?
Which?
And the World Cup is coming up.
Absolutely. Mu'in, can you share some highlights with us from your recent Connections episode, or Connections episodes? Because I know that you had a really busy month.
We've got him up here on the screen.
And you've been able to actually catch a lot of the important developments, whether it's in Iran, Egypt, or beyond.
Yeah, you've already summarized the 4 issues.
Okay, thank you very much. Then
see you next month.
See you next month.
Okay. You don't want to know what's coming up.
Yalla, go ahead.
So, well, started with political analyst Eric Hakopian discussing the Azeri attacks on Armenia and putting them in their regional and international context, which of course brought up issues relating to the war in Ukraine and how that is affecting the geopolitics of the South Caucasus. That was followed a week later by a discussion with Manija Moradian, who's of course also a Jadalia Iran page co-editor, discussing the ongoing uprising in Iran against the clerical regime, and also looking at related issues like not only the demands being put forth within Iran, but also the sometimes very problematic regional and international approaches to Iran. After that, as you mentioned, had a very interesting discussion with Jadalia co-editor Hisham Salam, based around his recent book discussing the tensions, let's say, and the instrumentalization of class and identity politics historically in contemporary Egypt, and what impact that is having on the development of that key Arab state today. And then finally, most recently, a fascinating discussion with United Nations Special Rapporteur on the human rights situation in the occupied territories, Francesca Albanese, who has just published her first report of her tenure on the right to self-determination, and a discussion around that. And I can briefly summarize what we have coming up if you'd like.
Yes, please.
Yes, please.
Well, tomorrow I'll be discussing the Israeli elections, the just concluded Israeli elections, with Mayrav Zonzain of International Crisis Group. Next Friday, we're going to be speaking with Rick Perlstein about the US midterms. After that, Jadaliya co-editor Lisa Hajar about her very widely praised and much anticipated new book on torture and Guantanamo and related issues. The week after that, Maya Mikdashi, also our fellow co-editor, about her much praised book on Lebanon sectarianism. And finally, Marwa Fatafta, who I've had on the show before, who works for Access Now, will be talking about internet-related issues like Elon Musk's recent privatization or takeover of Twitter and other issues related to internet freedoms.
Well,
Thank-
certainly lots to look forward to.
Thank you very much, Mu'in. This is quite a bit, and we really appreciate you doing this and keeping us informed by talking to the right people in all the cases that you said that you addressed. Is there anything else you'd like to share before we move on?
Yes, I still need to have you two on my show.
Me?
Us too.
Both of
I
you.
have a lot to share as well.
YouTube. Oh, yes. You wanna? What will you talk to us about?
I haven't thought about it yet.
How
but I'm
we've
sure we can
survived
find
each
it.
other for this long.
Absolutely.
There you go.
طيب.
Great.
شكرا معين. We will go to a
Hassan, okay, as always, great.
A pleasure.
speaking
Good
with
to see you.
salam. We will go to a quick interlude and we'll be back.
In an event co-sponsored by ASI and George Mason University's Schar School of Policy and Government, Jillian Schwedler, who is professor of political science at the City University of New York's Hunter College and the Graduate Center and non-resident senior fellow at the Crown Center at Brandeis University, discussed her new book titled Protesting Jordan: Geographies of Power and Dissent.
In her book, Jillian Schwedler considers how space and geography influence protests and repression, and by challenging conventional narratives of Hashemite state-making, offers the first in-depth study of rebellion in Jordan, arguing that protest has been a key method of political claim-making in Jordan from the late Ottoman period to the present day.
But let's not share too much because fortunately we have Jillian here with us today to share some
Absolutely.
highlights about her talk and moreover about her book.
Welcome, Jillian. And I must say that when we hosted her at George Mason, she was in my classroom as well, where we were discussing similar topics, and everyone had a wonderful time. It was a packed room listening to Jillian. Jillian, welcome to LWA again.
Thank you. It's great to be back.
Great to have you. So, Jillian, for those members of our audience who aren't particularly familiar, maybe with the geopolitical landscape of Jordan, can you give us some insight as to what conventional narratives of Hashemite state-making does your book challenge?
Great. Thank you. Yeah. So the conventional story is that Jordan is an invented state. And of course, actually, all states are invented states. But the story is that after World War I, the Hashemites and the British together moved into the area and set about creating a centralized state. That story is correct as far as it goes, but most of the narratives talk about protest and resistance to that, the many revolts that were violently put down, and then they treat them as if they're failed. And what I show in the book is that even failed protests, failed in that they were violently put down, nonetheless shaped state making. So the Adwan rebellion, for example, in 1923, which was put down by the British and many were killed, eventually that family, just a few months later, the Adwan tribe became very closely embedded with the regime and went on to be, top government officials, prime minister, senators, generals, etc. And so while the protest was failed, the rebellion was failed, it shaped the state making. And I have a bunch of examples that illustrate that point.
Thank you very much, Jillian. Can you share with us in what ways do space and geography interact in the Jordanian context to influence protest and repression, and perhaps something about if you can share with us something about where do you think things might be going in the current climate of frustration in Jordan overall?
Great. Yeah. So the book does engage a lot with geography and urban planning. And I show the ways in which the government tries to shape the built environment in ways that make it harder for protests to happen. And where protests do happen, end up shaping the built environment. So just to give a couple examples, I show a number of instances where protest spaces are eventually walled off. Plazas are surrounded by fencing and have landscape put in them so people can't gather there. Whole areas where people protest are simply rendered inaccessible through all kinds of infrastructure. Similarly, the Abdali Boulevard project was originally supposed to have a very large plaza above the Abdali Mall, which is an underground mall. And that project was abandoned. They didn't build the plaza specifically because they were worried that people would come and protest there. And so I develop a number of examples that show the ways in which the built environment shapes protest, and protests end up shaping the built environment. Once you read it, you kind of can't look at Amman the same way again as you move through it, because you can see this evidence all over the place. As for the future, I mean, things are very dire there now. Like many countries, the regime has used the pandemic as an excuse to crack down on dissidents, on all sorts of activism. There's still protests happening there, so people haven't stopped protesting entirely. But I suspect, as often is the case in Jordan, either some new austerity measures or something happening with Israel-Palestine will lead Jordanians to return to the street in masses at some point. The economic situation is dire right now. The regime seems very nervous. And the criticism I document in my book, there's growing criticism of direct criticism of the king, which is illegal under several laws. And for the longest time, people would criticize the prime minister instead of the king because you weren't allowed to criticize the king, even though the king was calling the shots. That's not the case anymore. People are very explicitly criticizing the king openly and publicly all the time. And so I think that'll be really fascinating to watch, that combination of the economic problems in the country and very high unemployment. The official figures for unemployment are over 40%. Official figures. So we know it's much higher than that. And so I think we're not going to see an end to protesting anytime soon, as much as the regime would like to.
Thank you so much. This is an absolute must-read text for not only anyone who is interested in Jordan or the Levant or just the Middle East. It's a great text.
And this is coming from a recent MA graduate from the Center.
We read a lot of your work, Jillian.
Contemporary Arab Studies, yes.
A good friend of mine works on Jordan, and he was very interested in your research, so I'm familiar with it.
Thank
Absolutely.
you so much.
Jillian, I want to say something which is basically that every day when I wake up, I turn on the news, on my phone or computer or TV, and I see two things. I see news about Iran, and I see news about you giving another talk about your book. So can you tell us a little bit about your tour so people can catch you?
Yeah, well, I have I announced my stops on Twitter and Facebook, and also I have a website, jillianschwedler.com, which has the upcoming talks on there. Yeah, I have a world book tour.
Wait a minute, you have a website where you have your tour?
I do. I have to update it, but I have a website there. Yeah, and I'll update that this afternoon. Yeah, it's jillianschwedler.com. And I was just at Princeton. Next week I'm at Penn. There we go.
Is that okay? Can I show it?
Of course.
Oh my God, this
Go to
is cool.
talks.
So yeah, well, it's not updated, so wait till I update it. See,
All right.
world tour. There we go.
World tour. All right. Look at all these places.
And as I said, it's not updated. And that picture is from the Gala book launch, sponsored by the Sidi Boussaid School of Critical Protest Studies in Tunisia, and that was in June.
Is this inappropriate that I went to the website without asking you?
No,
Okay, good.
it's
Imagine
a public website. So
I get
it's there.
canceled because
Yeah.
of that. Okay.
Yeah,
Oh, it's a
come down.
public
I'm doing-
website. Yeah, everybody can see it.
I'm
Tayyip.
doing lots and lots of talks, and I would love people to come out. I'm really happy to share the book with people, and thank you so much for giving me the opportunity here. to
Thank you
talk
for
about it.
coming on. But now you have to update it because people are going to rush to jillianschwedler.com.
I'll
So-
update it right now as soon as I'm off the air.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Jillian. We loved having you, and I loved hosting you. Our family loved hosting you here in Fairfax, Virginia, and I hope that we continue to engage with you in the future. And you and I talked about a little idea that we might work on together. So we will unveil that if it unfolds.
Coming soon.
Shukran. Thank you.
Afwan. Thank you, guys.
Take care.
Apologies if you could see Bassem and I laughing. That was our first time hearing that particular audio on that interlude.
Yeah, that was.
We didn't love it.
Well, it's nice.
The interlude is great, but we didn't
like for
love
a romantic scene
the
from a
music.
movie.
I have romantic feelings towards Middle East pedagogy. So.
I was just asking Bennett and Raina, who are our. You guys must have been in a really chill mood. That's really cool, actually. But yeah, if you thought the music was too romantic, yeah. If not, so enjoy it.
Well, folks, it is that time of year again with the Middle East Studies Association conference right around the corner, and it will be in person for the first time since the pandemic. Yeah. MESA's 56th annual meeting will take place December 1st through 4th in Denver, Colorado, and we hope to see as many of you there as we will be celebrating 30 years of the Arab Studies Institute. Come by our table to see, I'm reading Bassem's line, to see me, DJ Bassem.
Oh, no. Is that what? No, don't do that.
And Jed.
Okay.
So, anyhow, we will be having a reception. All are welcome. At this reception, we're going to cover some of the amazing things that are coming out. And wow, I started that sentence and didn't know where it was going. We will be discussing the things that we have done in the past that we are proud of, as well as upcoming events and projects from ASI. So it will be a great chance to see what's coming up next.
And it'll be a great chance also to be able to see who is behind so many of the projects that are always, happening at ASI, whether it's the team behind the Arab Studies Journal, the team behind Jadaliya, or at least some of them, the Knowledge Production Project, the Middle East Studies Pedagogy Initiative, Tadween Publishing, Status Podcast, and the many other projects that we have embarked on.
If you would like to meet us, the stars of the show,
we will be at the table. There's going to be
we do need to fundraise, so there might be a charge for a photo with us, but small
oh,
price
wait a
to
minute.
pay.
I've been trying to put this on the screen. It's right there behind us.
Yeah, I had it behind you.
Yeah.
So here's all the information. Feel free to screenshot it if you're watching right now. But we'll be tweeting about it and posting it on Facebook. So there will be no chance of you forgetting.
December 1st, 8 p.m. at Governors Square 12 at the hotel where Mesa is taking place. And we will have some hors d'oeuvres and drinks.
There will be food.
There will be food.
There will be food. There will be drink. And I would also like to mention, in addition to the reception, as per usual, there will be a large presence of members of the ASI team and community who will be presenting a particular person.
And now for some pedagogy initiative material.
The Middle East Studies Pedagogy Initiative team recently published 2 of the Engaging Books series. Bassem and I went back and forth on how to pronounce this one. Hupo or Hopo selections. Apologies, we genuinely don't know how to pronounce that. The Hopo selections on new fiction.
This is not professional of me.
I
I
know.
shouldn't be smiling.
I'm sorry, I don't know.
Sorry, we're both very sorry.
I'm so sorry. Anyhow, this selection of engaging books features new fiction from the Middle East, as was published by this publishing house. If you're not already familiar, Engaging Books is a monthly series featuring new and forthcoming books in Middle East studies from publishers around the globe. Each installment.
Let me say something.
Okay.
Each installment highlights a trending topic in the MENA publishing world and includes excerpts from the selected volumes. This installment covers information and an overview of our new pieces of fiction from the region.
The MESPI team also put out a new installment of the Arab Uprisings in Peer-Reviewed Articles Review series. This is the fourth of 6 parts of the series that present peer-reviewed articles concerned with the Arab uprisings published in 2010 to 2020 from our peer-reviewed articles database, with this particular issue covering the topic of Islamists and democratization. And I just want to make clear for anyone who isn't familiar with the peer-reviewed articles review series, this is an incredible resource, especially if you're working... Sure.
I'm trying to read what's on your show. I'm sorry.
This is an incredible resource for anyone who's working on various research projects. Essentially, you can type in on our website or on MESPI.org, you can type in a theme that you're working on. So, for example, Islamists and democratization. And someone has already done, our amazing team has already put in the hours and done the work to collect all the peer-reviewed articles that are related to that topic. So instead of going on a library for your university, digging in, coming up with some things that you're like, that's not what I want. This is just a way faster way.
And the person running this entire project, along with a small team of dedicated individuals, is Shakila Omar, who hails from South Africa and Mauritius.
And is amazing.
And is an amazing powerhouse who has been with us with the Middle East Studies Pedagogy Initiative from the very beginning, and is the person who actually launched the database both for Jadaliyya as well as some of the Middle East Studies Pedagogy Initiatives or the knowledge production project's database on peer-reviewed articles. I just want to give a big shout out to Shakila.
Absolutely. Nexit, as Arafat would say, Bassam taught me.
Nexit.
Nexit instead of next.
We abolished the word next, and we're going to say it like Yasser Arafat. Nexit.
Nexit. We'll go over a couple of new texts out now.
In this book, which is... the title of it is The Political Economy of Reforms in Egypt, Issues and Policy Making Since 1952. Khalid Ikram draws on his experience working on Egypt for the World Bank to illuminate the political economic factors that shaped Egyptian reforms since 1952. The discussion includes the role of interest groups, foreign actors, military crises, political institutions, among others, throughout the administrations of Nasser, Sadat, and Mubarak.
May al-Nakib's new novel, An Unlasting Home, is a multi-generational saga that traces the lives of 5 formidable women from the early 20th century to 2013 across Lebanon, Iraq, Kuwait, India, and the United States. This story is one of inherited trauma, migratory passage, loss, and resilience, as well as an exploration of a lost or forgotten Kuwait.
Finally, we will end on a couple of must-read recommendations.
Tadween Publishing is excited to announce the near release of The Search for Power, a new book by Jadaliyya co-editor Ziad Abu Rish, and I cannot get it to scroll down, but I know that it's Tanya Al-Khoury, who is Distinguished Artist in Residence of Theater and Performance and Director of the Center for Human Rights and the Arts at Bard College. The book follows their journey to document the history of electricity blackouts in Lebanon as their paper trail took them across 5 different countries and as far back as 1906 when studying the history of blackouts in Lebanon.
And we must say that this book is the product of a long period of preparation in order to put together not just the important visualization and the actual art performance, but also why does it say it's sold out?
That's interesting because it hasn't been released yet.
Yes. So we will fix that. It is not sold out. It's available.
Please buy it.
At $14.99 from basically tadweenpublishing.com. Please check it out. Ziad and Tanya have actually went over and beyond to address a very important topic in the most stimulating approach that we have seen definitely on Tadween and actually pretty much beyond. It's a worthwhile text. Check it out.
And again, that will be available in the coming days and or week or two.
Absolutely.
Finally, ASI co-sponsored an event with George Mason University, where Jadaliyya co-editor and associate professor in the Department of History at UC Santa Cruz, Mariam Hella Davis, discussed her new book titled, we'll roll the credits.
Absolutely.
And we'll see you soon.
Assalamu alaikum.